All right, kids, we done got our bluegrass hat on, our Merle Fest Americana Music Festival hat, because we're going to redneck it up in here today. I'm going to tell you, evangelize, if you will, about 5 things that you should watch on YouTube to write better fight scenes. Spoiler alert, they're all wrestling matches. Let me give you a little background on this. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a convention and I was talking about the craft of writing with Michael Stackpole and Gail Martin. And I mentioned that one of the ways I learned to write fight scenes is a lifetime of watching pro wrestling. And the room broke out into laughter. And Gail's heard this before. Gail and I have been on a lot of convention panels together, and we hang out a lot, so she knows my shtick. But this time she called me out. She's like, so I've heard you say this before. I'm like, yeah, I'm not terribly original. But can you give me some examples of what pro wrestling to watch? And I was like, huh. And I said, yes, I can. And we're going to start with the number one. What is often considered 3 of the greatest professional wrestling matches in the history of the sport, the Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat trilogy from 1979 and 1980 for the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. This is 3 60-minute World Heavyweight title matches, and over the course of each match and over the course of the trilogy of matches, they tell an amazing story. Because at its heart, that's what pro wrestling is. It's not just big, meaty men slapping meat. It's not just thinly veiled homoeroticism with men rubbing baby oil all over themselves and then rubbing up against each other in Speedos. It's not just a masculine soap opera. Although it's all of those things too. But at its heart, it is using athletics and combat sports to tell a story. In every match, there is the hero and the villain. There is the David and Goliath. There is the turns, the twists, the plot, and it's all told through slapping the ever-loving piss out of somebody safely. The reason that you watch pro wrestling to learn how to write a fight scene is because it has the same goals as you. They're telling a story through combat and motion. You can't get that watching real fights because an MMA match is not geared to telling a story. A boxing match may have a story evolve through it. An MMA match may have a story happen in it and or around it, but they're not built that way. Those people don't get in the ring thinking, I'm going to tell a great story and everyone's going to love it. They get in the ring thinking, I'm going to beat the ever-loving crap out of the person across the ring from me, and I'm going to then get more money than they are. Pro wrestling is all about the reaction. Your pay doesn't change, win or lose. You don't get paid by the hour. You basically get paid by applause. The crowd reacting, either screaming your name positively or booing, is what you're working towards. And that's what you're working towards when you're writing a fight scene too. So I'm going to give you 5 matches, or in the case of Flair Steamboat, sets of matches, and tell you specific things that you can learn from those matches about how to write a fight scene and types of fights that you can learn about. Flair Steamboat is kind of the pinnacle because it's 2 evenly matched competitors. At the time, Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair were 2 of the very best in-ring performers working in the world. They were fighting over, at the time, the most prestigious prize in professional wrestling, and they were putting on an absolute master class in the sport. They would start off with one having the upper hand and the other one would twist, and you had built-in stories because Ricky Steamboat was always so virtuous and so clean and so good, and Ric Flair was the dastardly villain and the rich guy, and he would come to the ring in these elaborate sequined robes, and you loved to hate Ric Flair and you loved to root for Ricky Steamboat. It is the classic good versus evil, evenly matched fight. And you watch these and you see them gain incremental advantages and cheat and overcome. And then finally, you have a winner. But then there's a rematch. And the rematch isn't clean. And it's not clear who won. And then there's another rematch. And then it's finally settled all for once and for all. And you're telling that huge combative story through these guys slapping the piss out of each other for 3 hours. And it's truly fantastic the way they move through space and the way they use athleticism to paint the picture and tell the story. Now, number 2. This is a little more recent, but still been a minute. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart in a submission match from WrestleMania 13. WrestleMania 13 was about 30 years ago, I believe exactly 30 years ago, so around mid-90s. And a submission match means that you can't just pin your opponent or throw him out of the ring and he can't get back in. They have to say, "I quit," or tap out. So they've got to give up. This is a grudge match. These guys come into this match after having fought for months. There's not a title at stake. They just don't like one another. And they want to inflict so much punishment on their opponent that they cannot take it. And at this point, these guys are huge stars at this point, and the crowd is kind of evenly split between who they love more. You've got the traditional hero in Bret Hart, the not all-American, but the all-Canadian good guy, who's the excellence of execution. He's just so smooth and so clean in the ring, and he's been so good for so long. And then you have Stone Cold Steve Austin, the roughneck redneck from Texas, the rattlesnake, the anti-hero, the guy who drinks Budweiser in the ring and flips off the crowd and kicks his boss in the nuts, and the guy that is the anti-authoritarian figure that everybody loves that too. So it's a generational clash of styles, and these guys are brutal. This match is not for the faint of heart. They are fighting all the way through the arena. They throw each other over the guardrail, go halfway back up the stands, slapping each other around in the middle of the crowd. They're throwing each other into ring posts. They're throwing each other into steel steps. Austin gets busted open and he's bleeding like a stuck pig. And they're going and going, and finally, the virtuous Bret Hart gets the dastardly redneck Steve Austin in his sharpshooter, his submission move that nobody gets out of. And you know that Steve Austin's going to have to tap out and give up. And you've got all these great shots that are tight on Austin's face, and the pain is etched in his face, and blood is just sheeting, and blood is covering the canvas, and he never, ever taps out. He passes out to the pain, but he never quits. And that is how you write a story where your protagonist loses and still comes out looking strong. Steve Austin was the guy that was going to carry the company forward into the future, and everybody knew it. But Bret Hart was still one of the very best in the world, and everybody knew that too. You couldn't afford to have either of these guys lose. But you had to. So they concocted a way that Austin could lose a submission match without submitting. And that is masterful storytelling. Now, the next one, number 3. The next 3 are much more recent. And all of these are available to watch in their entirety on YouTube. So after you've watched this video, and after you have clicked that subscribe button, left me a like, and left me a comment telling me your favorite wrestling match you've ever watched. Number 3. The first 2 have been big dudes, strong dudes, tearing each other apart. Well, the next one's for the ladies, because it's Sasha Banks versus Bayley in NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Sasha Banks was playing the nasty, mean girl, rich girl heel, and Bayley's character at the time was the sweet, lovable, chipper hugger who ran down to the ring, high-fiving everybody, and she'd take her headband off and give it to one of the kids in the audience. And you had the person you loved to hate and the person you loved to love. And Bayley, up until this point, had never been able to win the big one. She wasn't mean enough. She wasn't good enough. She wasn't strong enough. Sasha Banks was the champion. She was dirty and nasty and mean and vicious, and she had held on to the belt and was going to hold on to it some more. And this was their Iron Woman match. I don't remember. I think it was a 30-minute time limit, and whoever had the most pinfalls or submissions at the end of that time limit won the title. So you can't just beat your opponent once. You have to beat your opponent more times than they beat you in a specific time limit. And of course, the way they structure all of this is so that it comes down to the last couple of minutes and they're tied, and then right as everything's about to finish up, the person who wins gets one big victory. But so yes, they could absolutely just make it best of one and it'd be fine. But we're manufacturing tension here. What makes this good for writers and what makes this good storytelling are 2 things. One, these are small women. They're not, surprisingly enough, these women are not 6'6" and 300 pounds with bulging muscles. They're very fit, but they are not large human beings. I don't know how tall they are, but I'm guessing they're 5'6" or smaller, and significantly under 200 pounds. And they do not look like they can inflict a ton of damage. So they have to go about fighting in a different way. Because there's no one-punch knockouts when you're 120 pounds. Okay, there are. And please don't have any 120-pound knockout specialists come up to me at a convention to prove it. I believe you. But a one-punch knockout in your big match at the end of the night, it sucks for storytelling. So what these women did is they went back and forth and back and forth. And Bayley got an advantage, and then Sasha got an advantage. And then Bayley, in wrestling, you call it a white meat babyface, just the shiny, happy people slapping hands and loving everybody. Bayley was a white meat babyface, and the white meat babyface hardly ever beats the dirty heel. The heel is the bad guy in wrestling. So to win this match, Bayley, as our protagonist, had to dig down deep and go further than she had ever gone to finally get over the hump and win the title and vanquish the mean girl. And that's the story that they were telling through this match. And it's a fantastic piece of theater. It's a fantastic piece of storytelling. All of these are phenomenal, and you really should take the time to watch them all. And the next one is all about moving multiple people through space at one time. Number 4, this is also from NXT, which is a WWE developmental territory. This is American Alpha versus the Revival for the tag team championships. Now, in a tag team wrestling match, you got 2 guys fighting 2 other guys, but not at the same time. You got 1 guy from each team in the ring, and they go boom, 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 and beat each other up. And then one gets tired and tags his buddy in, and he comes in, and then the other guy tags his buddy in, and then they go boom, 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 boom. And, you know, the whole goal is to not let this guy tag this guy so that you and your buddy can beat him up more. It's really confusing. And what a good tag team match teaches you about writing fight scenes, which could translate into writing sex scenes, depending on how you're writing your sex scenes, you got to make sure all the body parts are in all the right places. But watching tag team wrestling helps you keep track of all of the multiple moving combatants in a different scene. And you can't lose track of fighters in your fight scene. You can't have 5 bad guys come in and your 2 protagonists beat the crap out of 4 of them while 1 dude is just kind of standing over here having a cigarette. You can't do that. So paying attention to a really good tag team wrestling match gives you a sense of the flow of moving multiple bodies in and out of a fight and how to give your characters a rest break when they need it to regroup, because that's what you're doing. If you've got a 4-on-4 brawl, well, if one of your guys takes out their opponent, then they can sit back for a second and breathe while the rest of the fight is going on, and then they can jump in for the double team. Watching a really great tag team match helps you learn to move bodies through space. And if you want to learn how to move bodies through space, one of the best matches in recent history that you can watch is from AEW's Forbidden Door pay-per-view, and it's Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. At any given year, you could make an argument that either of these men is the best professional wrestler on the planet. And at various years, they were. There have been years that Kenny Omega was the best performer inside a wrestling ring in the world. And there have been years where Will Ospreay was absolutely that as well. And this is a meeting between 2 absolute masters of the craft. These guys are almost Flair Steamboat level for their generation, but the thing that this match in particular will help you explore is the limits of what human beings can actually do. These guys move so stinking fast, and they are so clean and so crisp and leap so high and do such bizarro maneuvers and flippity-floppity-doos that it's almost impossible to keep track of, and you kind of pause and you back it up and you're like, yep, he did just jump from the ground to the second rope, over to the top rope over here, and then flip back over, and the guy he was going to land on moved, so instead of landing on top of the dude, he just landed on his feet and then spun around and kicked the dude in the face, but the dude had already dropped down and his face wasn't there, so he kicked up and kicked the other guy in the face. Yeah. Watching Omega Ospreay is a master class in fast, crisp, clean strikes and how to blend good old-fashioned slobber-knocking, as the maestro Dusty Rhodes used to say, to the flippity-floppity-doos. And it shows how you can pace a fight to start off super fast, flippity, floppity, flippity, floppity, and then take a second, breathe, twist a guy's arm until it looks like it's about to pop off. And then he flippity flops out of the twisty thing, and then the bouncy more. And it shows you how to create those ebbs and flows in a fight scene that you have to have if you're going to keep your audience engaged. So that's your homework. If you've made it all this way through, please subscribe, give me a like, and again, leave a note in the comments about your 2 favorite wrestling matches. Your favorite match you've ever seen on TV or video, and the favorite match you've ever seen live. My favorite match I ever saw on television was Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko in Eddie Guerrero's last match in ECW before he left for a bigger paycheck. And this was 2 guys who knew each other incredibly well. And it was so clean and so crisp. And they were telling a very good story that it was just a beautiful story. These guys knew each other so well and knew each other's moves so well that it was almost like they had rehearsed every bit of it, and you knew watching that they hadn't. They were 2 of the best in-ring performers of their generation, and this was their swan song match as far as they knew at the time. It was absolute beauty. And my favorite match I ever saw live was Konosuke Takeshita versus Will Ospreay at AEW Revolution 2024. I've never felt bad for the people in the world title match before. I felt bad for Swerve Strickland and Samoa Joe, who are fantastic performers, because they had to follow that Ospreay Takeshita match. Those guys, their styles were so very different, but they worked together so well. It was very much a high flyer in Will Ospreay versus an incredibly powerful bruiser in Konosuke Takeshita. And it was a thing of absolute beauty and had us on the edge of our seats for the entire time. And the reason I felt bad for Joe and Swerve after that is because we were just exhausted. There had been so much, it was incredible. And that made it was kind of like, Jerry Lee Lewis setting the piano on fire, kicking it off the edge of the stage, looking at Little Richard and saying, follow that. These guys put on an absolute clinic. So those are my favorite matches that I've ever seen live and on TV. Looking forward to hearing what yours are, and I'll be back next time, probably without the hat, but maybe. Until then, bye.